Mom accidentally sends baby's prescription to CEO. His unexpected response will shock you. Sarah's hand shook as she typed out the message on her phone. The haze of exhaustion from her 12-hour shift at the hospital threatened to swallow her whole. Her mind was racing, pushing against a wall of anxiety as she struggled to keep track of everything. "Just send the prescription, Sarah," she muttered under her breath. In the chaos of juggling her demanding job and a newborn son, Leo, her fingers slipped, and she accidentally sent the critical medication request to Brian, the CEO of a tech company that had its office miles away in a city that felt light years from her small town. Hours later, Sarah collapsed onto her bed, the weight of her exhaustion pressing down like a ton of bricks. She sighed, thinking of Leo, tucked away in his crib, depending on her for everything. Most days, it felt like a battle against the odds. Each time she sat with a pile of bills, the unrelenting pressure gnawed at her insides. Could she keep pushing through? Would she be enough for him? That thought flickered in her mind again, a taunting echo. She closed her eyes, trying to dispel the looming worry, but her attempts to shut it out were futile. As Brian opened the message, his expertly crafted routine was disrupted by an unexpected plea. The words pulled him from the world of spreadsheets and conference calls, abruptly shattering the bubble of his detached corporate existence. The narrative woven in her message unfolded like a landscaper revealing a hidden garden. A mother, desperate for her child, tugged at a string within him. But was this another unremarkable interaction, just another algorithmic transaction? How easily he could ignore the pathos of her story, yet something stopped him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Back in her cramped apartment, the echo of her pride lingered bitterly. Would accepting help brand her as weak? Even the thought of reciprocating his kindness felt impossible, an imaginary mountain she couldn't climb. Sarah's heart raced, conflicted between the gnawing terror that she couldn't afford the medication and the feeling of raw indignity. What was the line between accepting charity and protecting her dignity? Images of Leo's fragile little face swam before her, and she felt a warmth mixed with desperation claw at her throat. As Brian sat in his lavish office, contemplating Sarah's words, he instinctively recognized something stirring in him. The disconnect between their lives felt almost cruel. With every passing second, the narrative he once brushed off grew heavier. What could he do to engage with her struggle? Meanwhile, Sarah's breath hitched at the thought that Brian would soon uncover her truth. If he found out she desperately needed what he had just read about, everything she believed about herself could collapse. Would she turn to him for help? Would raw desperation finally force her to reach out and expose her vulnerabilities? The anguish grew deeper, tightening like a vice around her chest. Sarah's heart beat recklessly against the backdrop of unkept promises and brittle hopes, leaving her hanging on the precipice of an impossible decision. Would she break her silence, revealing her plight, or would she suffocate under the weight of pride? As her mind swirled with conflicting emotions, the tension built to an unbearable pitch, leaving her tangled in uncertainty. The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains, casting streaks of light across Sarah's cluttered kitchen. She jolted awake, the remnants of last night's sleeplessness still etched into her being. Glancing at the clock, she realized she'd barely left herself enough time to prepare Leo's breakfast before her next shift. Her heart raced, reminding her of the tight schedule she needed to adhere to if she stood any chance of keeping everything together. As she scrambled eggs and prepared a bottle, Sarah's mind flickered back to Brian's response, or lack thereof. Had he ignored her message as she feared, or was he contemplating a way to help? The uncertainty gnawed at her like a relentless tick, feeding into her growing anxiety. Could she afford to rely on someone like him? The thought sent her spiraling into a web of doubt. After breakfast and a few frantic minutes organizing the diaper bag, Sarah kissed Leo's cheek and rushed out the door. She drove to the hospital, the scenery outside becoming a blur of movement and color. But inside her mind, one thought dominated: what if Brian had been disturbed enough to respond? The prospect of facing him, this man cloaked in privilege, felt both terrifying and oddly exhilarating. Her shift began with familiar routine, checking in on patients, assisting in procedures, and dousing herself in the comforting rhythm of her work. Strangely, amidst the chaos, snippets of elevated intuition began to surface, urging her to confront her fears. What if this unexpected encounter with Brian could alter not just her circumstances but also her perspective? Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to redefine her self-worth. Time passed, but the weight of uncertainty clung to her. When her shift finally ended, Sarah hesitated before retrieving her phone from her locker. With a breath stuck deep in her chest, she opened her messages. To her shock, there was a response from Brian waiting in her inbox. His words, while succinct, were encouraging. He offered to connect her with a healthcare program that could help alleviate her financial burden. The proposition pulled her in a million different directions. A wave of relief crashed over her, but it was quickly followed by the familiar tension of pride. Could she accept this offer without feeling crushed by her own vulnerability? What would it mean to engage with someone so far removed from her daily life? She paced the empty break room, her heart thumping loudly in her ears. The internal battle between pride and desperation eclipsed her thoughts. Every instinct warned her to shield her personal life from the sharp edges of corporate kindness, yet part of her longed for a break, to see the world from a different angle, to step away from the desperation that had clouded her vision. The decision loomed ahead like an unfathomable chasm. Could she abandon the part of her identity that deemed vulnerability as weakness? For all her struggles and sacrifices, was it time to embrace a different path? As she ran her fingers over her phone screen, a sense of urgency intertwined with clarity began to emerge. Sarah took a deep breath and opened a new message, her fingers shaky yet determined as she began to type. What would she say? Would she express her fears and vulnerabilities to the stranger who inadvertently stumbled into her life? Or would she play it safe, keeping her heart walled off? The choice echoed loudly within her, leaving her suspended between what she needed and what she feared. As she typed the first few words, a flicker of determination ignited within, blurring the edge of fear she had long coddled. Perhaps this was the moment that could change everything, not just for Leo, but for her. But just as she readied to send the message, an incoming call disrupted her thoughts. The caller ID sent a jolt through her. It was her mother. Would this be another reminder of the burdens she felt weighed down by, or could it offer another perspective on the difficult choices ahead? The uncertainty gripped her, entangling her thoughts in a web of questioning once more. Would she answer the call now, or confront the unfolding of her life with Brian? In that moment of hesitation, a pivotal decision lay ahead, ready to reshape the trajectory of her life in ways she could not yet comprehend. Sarah's finger hovered over the answer button, uncertainty swirling within her chest. The stark reality of her mother's call felt like a tether to all the decisions she had made or had not made. The voice on the other end could either be a lifeline or an added burden, a dilemma she was all too familiar with. With a sigh, she decided to answer, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Hi, Mom. Sarah. I need to talk," her mother's voice crackled, urgency weaving through her words. "Have you heard from Brian yet?" The question set off alarm bells in Sarah's mind. How did her mother know about Brian? Who had been talking? "I received his message," she replied cautiously, stretching for the right words. "He offered help. You should take it." Her mother's words came swift, laced with a hint of desperation. "You can't keep doing everything on your own." The intensity of her mother's plea mirrored Sarah's internal conflict. "It's not that simple," she pushed back, her voice low, as if speaking the truth aloud would solidify the decision she was resisting. Accepting help doesn't come without strings attached. I don't want to owe anyone anything. Sometimes you have to let go of pride for the sake of your child, her mother replied, a touch of frustration edging into her tone. Leo deserves better. And so do you. As her mother's words settled into her mind, an unexpected wave of resentment ticked through Sarah. She didn't want pity. But she also didn't want fear dictating her choices any longer. The walls she had constructed around her vulnerabilities began to crack, exposing raw, jagged emotions she usually kept hidden. I know, Mom. I'm trying, she said, struggling to hold back the tide of heat rising in her chest. But everything has a cost. Can't you see that? Accepting help means losing control. Her mother's silence bore down heavy. It was a reminder of years spent feeling less than adequate, of choices made that didn't quite fit into the neat boxes of success and stability. She felt the weight of her mother's failures suffocating her own hopes. Sarah, you don't have to do it alone, her mother finally said softly. You know I didn't always get it right. But you can learn from my mistakes. Don't waste the opportunities handed to you. With those words, something shifted in Sarah. She felt a coil of resolve tightening within, battling against her fears. She relayed the specifics of Brian's message, half expecting her mother to disapprove, but instead, she received an unexpected tone of encouragement. Maybe this is your chance, Sarah. Not just for the program, but for your own growth. Struggling between gratitude and frustration, Sarah ended the call. It wasn't just her moment of decision anymore, it was a lineage of expectations bequeathed to her like an unwanted inheritance. She stood alone in the break room, the echo of their conversation dancing in her thoughts. Did her mother know how hard it was for Sarah to break through the deep desire for independence? Wanting to prove she could be self-sufficient while struggling to balance the picture of her life felt like juggling fire. Taking another deep breath, she turned back to her phone, staring at Brian's message. Perhaps her mother was right. Maybe this could be a moment to redefine herself. The burden of past expectations was hers to dismantle, but it would take more than mere willpower. Would she allow this connection to reshape her relationship with vulnerability, or would she cling to pride, letting one more chance slip away? A sudden resolve pulsed through her. She would engage with Brian not just for her sake, but for Leo's future. Yet, confronting the complexities of needing help was one thing, initiating that conversation would be entirely another. As she began to type a reply to Brian, a single thought crashed into her mind: the cost of vulnerability was high, but the price of isolation was proving to be even greater. The moment hung in suspension, and as the words appeared on the screen, a new wave of anxiety surged inside her. Was she ready to admit her needs? Before she could second-guess herself, she hit send. But as she did, a new message pinged in. It was from Brian. The content shocked her, a single sentence that shattered her expectations. Thank you for your openness. I believe it's time we discuss this face-to-face. Her heart raced. Would this move promise clarity, or pull her deeper into chaos? The answer lingered in the air, slippery and uncertain, wondering if her journey toward self-discovery was just beginning, that the real confrontation lay ahead. The sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the break room floor. Sarah's pulse quickened as she stared at Brian's message, the weight of his words thrumming in her chest. A face-to-face discussion had always felt distant, theoretical. Now it was tangible, imminent. She had anticipated this moment for weeks, the exchange of ideas and intentions where she would finally lay bare her aspirations and fears. Yet, now that it was at her doorstep, dread swirled within her. What did she have to offer him beyond her vulnerability? As a project coordinator, balance was her forte, but here, standing between the lines of her own life, it felt like she was teetering on a tightrope. With little more than mere minutes to prepare, she navigated to a nearby table and sat down. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and she pressed her fingertips into her palms, grounding herself. Would she keep talking herself into a corner? As her thoughts spiraled, she drew a deep breath, forcing calmness into the chaos. Flipping her phone over, she resisted the impulse to check the time again. This meeting could redefine everything. After all, if she were brave enough to connect with Brian, wasn't it also time to confront the emotional barricades that crowded her heart? She resolved to approach this not as a moment of weakness but as a powerful act of self-awareness. Her mind raced with possible scenarios: Brian's face when she revealed her challenges, the mixture of empathy and professional acuity he might bring to the table. As a seasoned executive, he could just as easily dismiss her, or worse, pity her. But deep down, she craved respect, genuine respect over sympathy. The clock ticked slowly, and Sarah began jotting down points for discussion. She wanted clarity, a solid direction for her aspirations. This was also her chance to lay aside her identity as solely a mother and thrust herself into the realm of ambition. She wrote, discuss goals, express needs, clarify expectations. Each bullet was a seed of potential, and the ink felt like a promise to herself, a promise to step into the unfolding narrative of her life. As she pondered her ambitions, her thoughts drifted to Leo. Nothing mattered more than providing him with stability and opportunity. The attack of self-doubt was palpable as she considered whether Brian would see her as an asset or merely a case to handle. Perhaps this was more than a conversation, it was an opportunity for growth, a way to shift the cycle of dependence that kept her tethered to her past. Moments later, her phone buzzed with another notification, surprising her. It was simply a calendar reminder it was time. A tidal wave of anxiety flooded through her, but with it, an ember of resolve flared into life. She was not a victim of her circumstances, she was an architect, ready to build anew. With wobbly legs, she pushed herself up from the table and headed toward the meeting room. The sensation in her gut was a blend of dread and adrenaline. She had spoken to her mother about overcoming fear, and here she was, facing the embodiment of that fear in the form of Brian. As she crossed the threshold, Sarah took a moment to compose herself, letting breath in and out to steady her nerves. This wasn't just a meeting about collaboration, it was a leap into vulnerability, a test of her newfound resolve. Yet as she stepped forward, uncertainty clouded her mind again. What if she stumbled over her words? What if he misunderstood her intentions? The familiar walls of insecurity began to close in, but she fought to push them down. The echoes of her mother's voice replayed in her mind, you don't have to do it alone. Determined, she opened the door and walked in. The air was heavy with potential, and as she took her seat, she realized this was more than a meeting about work, it was about her future. Thank you for meeting with me, she began, and the first words felt like a breakthrough. But before she could continue, something unexpected happened. Just as she opened her mouth, Brian glanced at her with keen intensity, his expression intense and unwavering. Before we start, I have a question that might shift everything. The air thickened with anticipation, and she braced herself for whatever was to come, blending her hope with a sliver of fear. What was he about to reveal, and would it jolt their conversation into uncharted territory? The meeting room felt vast, swallowing the strained silence as Brian's question hung between them. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing through her defenses. What drives you, Sarah? Beyond the job, beyond the responsibilities. What pushes you to excel and to keep striving? She blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't just a question, it was an invitation to expose the core of her being. Her heart raced, accelerating the once steady rhythm that matched the tick of the wall clock. Did he truly want to know, or was it a standard professional query? Clarity and self-awareness washed over her in waves. What compelled her? She found herself navigating through a maze of her life. My son, she began, testing the words, as if they felt foreign. I want him to have choices, opportunities one didn't have when I was growing up. I want to create a better future for him. Brian nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding passing across his face. That small gesture ignited something within her, a sense of purpose that felt both refreshing and overwhelming. There was weight in her words, they mattered. Yet as she spoke, doubts clawed at the edges of her mind. What did she know about creating opportunities? Wasn't she still mired in uncertainty herself? The fear of failure is something I wrestle with daily, she admitted, the confession slipping out almost involuntarily. She fought the urge to withdraw, to align with that familiar wall of self-doubt. Sometimes it feels as if I'm not enough, not as a professional, not as a mother. Brian leaned back, his chair creaking slightly as he considered her words. But it sounds like you're here today because you want to change that narrative. His observation hit home, striking a chord deep within. Yes, she was here to change her story, to weave in threads of ambition alongside motherhood. The realization caught her breath, infusing her voice with resolve. I want to show Leo that resilience can coexist with vulnerability, that striving for more doesn't diminish those we love. His expression shifted, morphing from merely inquisitive to genuinely engaged. That's powerful, Sarah. Balancing those roles is no small feat, and it's clear you're driven, but do you see that as a strength or a burden? A new perspective challenged her. Was this vigilant self-questioning a sign of weakness, or the fuel for her potential? Perhaps her ability to reflect, to feel deeply, was precisely what set her apart. I see it as both, she replied slowly. It drives me to improve, but it also weighs me down. How do I channel these fears into something constructive? Their conversation danced around her vulnerabilities, and she found herself opening up in ways she had not prepared for. Gratitude bloomed within her, not just for the process, but for Brian's willingness to engage without preconceived notions. It was a strengthening experience, one she hadn't anticipated. Moments passed as Brian outlined expectations and challenges, painting a picture of where she could fit within the company's landscape. While he highlighted the demands of her role, he also illuminated the possibility of influence. The tension in her shoulders began to ebb with each word, replaced by a sense of agency she hadn't felt in years. As they wrapped up the meeting, Sarah felt a clarity that was both exhilarating and frightening. This was more than just a conversation, it was a pivotal moment. She had stared her fears in the face and remained standing. She was still here, better for it. Before they parted ways, Brian handed her a file folder with a collection of resources. This could help you along the way, he said, his tone encouraging yet firm. It's okay to feel uncertain, but never mistake your worth. As she accepted the folder, she felt a surge of optimism. Maybe she was more than her past, perhaps she had the capacity to redefine her present. But before she could express her thanks, Brian added, "There's one more thing we need to discuss in our next meeting, something important about your growth trajectory that could change everything." The room shifted, and the weight of his last words loomed large in the air. She left feeling empowered, but with curious anticipation. What crucial insight did he possess that might alter her path once more? Stepping out of the meeting room, Sarah was enveloped by the bustling energy of the open office space. The sound of typing, laughter, and the distant murmur of phone calls faded into a low hum, creating an almost surreal atmosphere where she felt both grounded and unmoored. She clutched the file in her hand, its weight a tangible representation of her shifting perspective. What was this next revelation that Brian hinted at? She churned the question in her mind, wrestling with both excitement and trepidation. This was new territory, and though she had always been one to shy from the unknown, the desire to grow pushed her onwards. She made her way to her desk, each step accompanied by a newfound confidence that seemed to ripple through her. The mundane chaos that surrounded her, the phone ringing off the hook, the colleagues engaged in lively discussions, now felt invigorating rather than overwhelming. Her focus shifted, and she leaned her head forward, intent on finding a pathway through her daily tasks. As her eyes scanned her to-do list, her thoughts whirled. The pressure of being a single mother, a professional woman, and now a woman on the cusp of something more robust, it was a lot, and the prospect felt both exhilarating and daunting. Every bullet point on her list reflected the life she had built, but deeper down, she felt an undercurrent of change threatening to unravel her carefully woven tapestry. What if she failed? What if she didn't meet the expectations that lay ahead? These thoughts clawed back at her, echoing her earlier doubts. But then again, what if she succeeded? What if Brian's insights revealed paths she never thought possible? The duality of fear and hope warred within her, two sides of the same coin thrown into the air, spinning and spinning. As she cleared her desk and organized her workspace, her resolve solidified. She couldn't shield herself from fear, it was part of the entire journey. So she opted to use it as fuel instead. If she could confront her uncertainty about motherhood, why not do the same with her career ambitions? The light behind her eyes flickered with a determined spark. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. A message from Leo's daycare read, "We need to discuss your child's medication. Please come in." Panic surged through her as a knot formed in her stomach. She struggled with the overwhelming fear of being inadequate, a mother who couldn't navigate even the basic needs of her son. As she made her way to grab her bag, she mentally reframed the situation. It was a challenge, but one she could tackle head-on. Maybe this was an opportunity to showcase her determination, both as a mother and a professional. She took a deep breath, channeling her focus into the forthcoming conversation at the daycare while reminding herself she had navigated difficult waters before. Riding the subway, she found herself balancing her thoughts between her roles. What she often perceived as conflicting responsibilities were beginning to intertwine in her mind. She envisioned the scenarios where she could advocate for her son with the same confidence she hoped to summon in the corporate world. Once she arrived, she felt the familiar anxiety trickle back in as the staff led her to an office for the discussion. As they explained the specific issues surrounding Leo's medication and the necessary prescription adjustments, she focused on clarity. Each phrase they uttered felt like a piece of a larger puzzle she needed to assemble. Mid-conversation, the phone vibrated in her pocket. An email notification from Brian popped up, the subject line teasing the discussion they would have next: growth discussion, rethinking your role. A surge of anticipation coursed through her. Would she have the courage to embrace whatever path lay before her? And just as she was about to respond to the daycare staff with renewed confidence, a realization struck her. The duality of her professional and personal world wasn't just a balancing act, it was her strength. As she gathered her composure and turned to continue the conversation, the weight of her responsibilities shifted. There was power in vulnerability, as she was about to discover. But just then, an unexpected phone call interrupted her thoughts. With a glance at the screen, she saw a familiar name: Brian. Would this be about the growth discussion he mentioned? Or did something else change the course of her life's newfound trajectory? She hesitated for a moment, choosing to answer. "Hello, Brian. Sarah, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Brian's voice flowed through the phone, smooth yet authoritative, grounding her momentarily. "No, not at all. I was just finishing up a conversation at Leo's daycare," she replied, feigning a calmness that felt elusive. The tension between her professional ambitions and parental responsibilities tangled in her mind, highlighting her need to prioritize. "I wanted to discuss the growth discussion invitation I sent earlier, the ideas we talked about in the meeting. You seemed energized, and I think you're on the brink of something significant," he said. His words ignited a flicker of excitement. Just when she thought she was about to shuffle back into the shadows, Brian's confidence in her reignited a smoldering fire of ambition. "Could we set up a time to brainstorm?" she asked, matching his energy with resolve. She felt a shift in her own capability to voice her needs. "Absolutely. I was thinking tomorrow morning. We can explore the direction we want your new responsibilities to take," he replied, oblivious to her internal conflict, or perhaps sensing it and challenging her to step up. "Tomorrow works," she said. With her heart racing, fueled by both anxiety and exhilaration, she added, "And I'll come prepared." As they ended the call, Sarah's mind abuzz with anticipation, she returned her attention to the daycare staff. Leaning in, she adopted an assertive tone. "Let us clarify the medication adjustments," she said, allowing herself to become the advocate she envisioned. The conversation shifted from passive listening to active engagement. Questions flowed from her lips, and as she gleaned insights, a transformation took place. The woman who had walked in feeling overwhelmed was gradually emerging as a competent ally, both for her son and to herself. After the meeting, Sarah exited the daycare deeper in thought. The clarity she craved began to crystallize. She was no longer content to flounder beneath the pressures of motherhood and work, she began to see them as intertwined chaotically yet beautifully. Each role buoyed the other, and her understanding deepened that she could embrace the messiness of both lives. Back on the subway, she replayed the conversation with Brian in her head, strategizing ways to prepare for their meeting. The nature of her new role would require her to visualize not just her immediate tasks but the broader impact she could have. She began brainstorming initiatives, imagining how she could integrate her personal experiences as a mother into her professional ethos. Arriving home, she found Leo ensconced in a pile of toys. His laughter pierced her doubts, acting as a balm for her ruminating thoughts. She played with him, embracing the moments of joy and connection that knit her two worlds together. Later that evening, as she finally settled down with her laptop, her fingers paused above the keys. She wanted to bring her whole self into the conversation with Brian, not just the corporate player but the mother battling unseen battles. She decided to craft proposals that reflected her real experiences, those that brought her insights about resilience and determination. She began typing. Each proposal emerged from a place of authenticity, setting forth a vision for her professional future that was collaborative and anchored firmly in personal truth. The moments of uncertainty began to shift into the comfort of purpose, and Sarah felt a rush of belief in her ability to navigate this next phase of her life. As she finished her work, the phone rang again, startling her. This time, it was Leo's doctor. A lump of anxiety returned as she answered, dread creeping in the back of her mind. "Hello, Dr. Morgan. Sarah, we need to speak regarding Leo's condition. It's urgent." Her heart raced, and suddenly the clarity and ambition she had felt only moments ago began to dissolve into apprehension. What new challenges lay ahead? Would she have the strength to face them all, or were the scales of balance beginning to tip? "Of course. I'm listening," she replied, steadying her breath. Unsure of the turbulent journey awaiting her. The sterile scent of antiseptic permeated the doctor's office, amplifying Sarah's unease. She sat on the examine table, a stark white paper crinkling beneath her as Dr. Morgan entered, her expression stern but not unkind. Sarah had grown accustomed to this dichotomy in medical professionals, the flickering hope buried beneath thick layers of clinical detachment. "Sarah, you know the progress Leo has made, but we've observed some concerning symptoms. I believe we need to consider adjusting his treatment plan," Dr. Morgan began, her tone measured. The urgency in her voice contrasted sharply with the serene calm that had just enveloped Sarah moments before. "Adjusting treatments?" The words thudded in her mind like heavy stones. Just as she had started to find her footing, new revelations threatened to send her toppling again. What does that mean for his current medication? Is it serious? The questions tumbled out, each rattling the cage of her composure. Dr. Morgan hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't want to alarm you, but some of the reactions we're observing could indicate a need for a more specialized approach. I recommend a consultation with a pediatric specialist in 3 days. 3 days. It felt like an eternity. The image of Leo's laughing face haunted her, and she could almost feel the tremors of anxiety creeping under her skin. This was yet another reminder of how quickly her resolve could be overshadowed by doubt. But the determination from earlier flickered back to life. She took a breath, gathering herself. "What do I need to do?" Dr. Morgan outlined a plan and handed over a prescription to be filled. The momentary simmer of clarity felt overshadowed by the flood of reality setting in. Confident decisions had to be made quickly, and she couldn't let fear paralyze her. Leaving the doctor's office, a sense of urgency propelled her. She knew she had to confront her fears and channel them into something productive. With Leo's future hanging in the balance, not only was she his advocate, but she was now inadvertently becoming a warrior in the medical maze. Arriving home, her intuitive maternal instincts surged. She scooped Leo into her arms, holding him as if he were made of glass. The weight of his small body anchored her, giving strength as she formulated a new plan. She needed information and fast. The clock was ticking, and so were the implications of Leo's health condition. After putting Leo down for a nap, Sarah poured herself into research. Scanned articles, medical journals, and parent forums sprawled across her laptop screen. She furiously took notes, synthesizing complex medical jargon into something comprehensible. Each detail illuminated a path she could use to navigate the terrain of specialists and treatment options. Hours passed, but this was not simply about preparation for an upcoming meeting. This was about asserting control in a situation that threatened to destabilize everything. She was no longer simply a mother, she was a strategist, a researcher confronting the unknown. As dusk settled, Sarah leaned back in her chair, mind racing with a mosaic of potential strategies. She relished the empowerment filling the voids anxiety had previously occupied. There was still so much to untangle, but now she had a grasp on her focus. Her phone buzzed, a text message from Brian. "Excited for our meeting tomorrow. Let's discuss how we can roll out the growth initiatives effectively." A tug of resolve beckoned her as she stared at the screen. Should she share the developments about Leo, the depth of her struggle, perhaps even how it intertwined with her aspirations? The fear of vulnerability clawed at her, yet the potential for deeper understanding intrigued her. As she typed a thoughtful response, she used the moment to reaffirm her agenda for their discussion, ensuring her voice would resonate. The stakes had changed. She wasn't merely advocating for growth in her career anymore, she was asserting her identity through the lens of her experiences, as a professional and as a mother. "Absolutely, Brian. Ready to share some exciting proposals that truly reflect my journey." She sent the message and leaned back, allowing herself an uncharacteristic moment of anticipation. But with each flicker of ambition, seeds of doubt intermingled. Would she be accepted as she truly was, with all her complexities? Or would her vulnerabilities lead her to some hard confrontations with colleagues who didn't understand the battles she faced? With a tightening in her chest, Sarah steadied her mind. The challenges ahead loomed large, and uncertainty stirred like a storm. But one thing was clear, she had decided to confront both the personal and professional landscape without reservation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she couldn't shake the feeling that the tempest was only just beginning. What other unpredictable twists would arise, demanding she embrace both her fears and newfound strengths? The answer loomed, tantalizing and terrifying all at once. The next morning, a cool breeze swept through the open window, lending a sense of renewal. Sarah awoke, the remnants of yesterday's anxiety still gripping her, but today felt different. There was potential in her disquiet. She needed to focus. After the usual morning chaos of getting Leo ready, she glanced at the clock. Time was not on her side. She had a meeting with Brian in a matter of hours to discuss strategies for their upcoming initiatives. This could be an opportunity not just to advance her professional standing but also to subtly intertwine her narrative as a mother into her work. She needed to weave her personal experiences into her proposals, a tactic that could set her apart from her colleagues. As she tucked Leo into his car seat, a thought struck her: what if she used her own journey as a case study? The complexities of parenting a child with health issues could resonate within the team's goals of understanding customer journeys and challenges. This could be her breakthrough. Driving to work, she played different scenarios in her head. Would Brian understand the connection between Leo's situation and their projects? Would her colleagues be receptive to thoughts rooted in personal experience? With each possibility, her confidence grew. She knew navigating this personal-professional boundary would not be easy. Yet, the notion of being authentic and sharing her reality with them filled her with unexpected exhilaration. When she arrived at the office, the familiar hum of activity enveloped her. People rushed to their desks while others lingered over coffee, discussing projections and deadlines. Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was another battlefield where she would exert agency. As she walked through the busy floor, her senses heightened, each writerly impulse igniting like a match. The conference room was stark and bright, reserved for the group meeting. As the team gathered, Sarah caught snippets of conversation that highlighted the directions they might take. Brian arrived, his usual upbeat self, but today she noticed a shadow of intensity in his eyes. He was prepared, which meant she had to be even more so. As they started the discussion, she sat forward, her mind reeling with strategies and insights. When it was her turn to share, she engaged fully, integrating thoughts about customer empathy with her lived experience. "You know," she began, her voice steadying, "I've been reflecting on how the challenges parents face when dealing with medical issues correlate with our customers' experiences." Several heads nodded, and her pulse quickened. This was the moment of truth. The concept struck a chord, and she felt a ripple of cautious optimism sweep through the room. As the conversation unfolded, she saw a flicker of recognition in Brian's expression, a spark of understanding. "That's a compelling point, Sarah. Personal anecdotes can anchor our strategies in a more relatable way." Their discussion deepened, and before long, she felt the barriers between her personal life and her professional aspirations dissolve. Yet, a small voice within warned her not to get too carried away. How much should she really share? When the meeting wrapped up, Brian turned to her. "Let us explore that line of thought further, it could be key to our next campaign." His enthusiasm ignited new possibilities within her, but she sensed a lingering need for caution. Later that afternoon, as she prepared to leave, an impulsive urge tugged at her. Sarah hesitated but ultimately decided to send Brian an email. She included additional insights, weaving in pieces about Leo's situation and how it had reshaped her perspective on communication and connection. Just before hitting send, her heart raced. Should she reveal such personal details? However, she rationalized, sharing her vulnerability could enhance their collaboration. With a deep breath, she pressed send. This impulse was unlike Sarah. She felt exposed, exhilarated, and terrified. As she left the office, she knew she had stepped into uncharted territory. She wondered how Brian would respond. Would he perceive her as authentic, or would her vulnerability backfire? As she faced another evening with Leo, inevitable anxieties began to swirl within her again. But this time, they blended with a new resolve. She was no longer just surviving, she was evolving. Whatever came next, she was ready for, whether it would elevate her personally or professionally. With a clenching sense of uncertainty, she wondered how soon she would hear back from Brian. The thrill of sharing her truth lingered, but with it, a tremor of fear. Had she crossed an unseen line? The sun ascended, casting a golden hue across the quiet town. Sarah awoke renewed, the weight of her previous uncertainties receding like a tide. Today marked a pivotal moment. Brian was expected to reply to the email she had sent, revealing parts of herself she had kept locked away. The coffee brewed, and she prepared breakfast for Leo, her movements fluid and confident. She embraced the mundane routines of motherhood, transforming each task into an act of productivity and purpose. Though uncertainties lingered in her mind, there was an undercurrent of excitement flowing through her veins as she contemplated the potential changes ahead. After Leo was settled for the day with a new babysitter, Sarah opened her laptop, poised to engage in the tasks that awaited her. Her heart fluttered momentarily as she clicked on her email, her pulse quickening as her eyes darted across the screen. To her surprise, there was a message from Brian, and each word held promise. "Sarah, thank you for your candid insights. I am inspired by your willingness to merge personal experience with our strategies. Let us discuss this further at the next team meeting." I see great potential in your ideas, and your unique perspective can drive our initiatives forward. The powerful validation surged through her, igniting a fire within. Instead of the anticipated apprehension, joy bloomed in her chest as she realized she had struck a chord her authentic voice could resonate within the corporate framework. With each word she read, the fears she harbored crumbled away, replaced by a solid foundation of recognition. Reflecting back on her journey thus far, she embraced the full spectrum of her experiences, from the sleepless nights in the hospital to the frantic days filled with meetings and deadlines. Every moment had been sculpting her narrative, an undeniable tapestry of resilience. She felt not only pride in her efforts but a burgeoning confidence that had previously eluded her. The meeting day arrived, and the room buzzed with energy. Brian set the stage, and as he introduced her segment, she could feel confidence flooding through her body. Her proposal tied in elements of empathy and personal connection, her insights on parenting intertwined with corporate strategies. Building a brand that communicates clearly with its audience is about recognizing the journeys they navigate, she declared. Every challenge a parent faces in securing healthcare can map out a customer's journey, creating pathways for us to innovate solutions. As ideas flowed, it took surprising turns. Colleagues eagerly contributed, and Sarah was no longer the peripheral figure she had once been. She saw Brian nodding approvingly, and the atmosphere shifted to one of collaboration, charged with purpose. By the end of the meeting, applause echoed as her contributions took root, discussions sparked excitement for a new angle on their projects. She had conquered not just the space in the room but the fears that had often shackled her, proving she was a powerful force in her own right. Days turned into weeks, and with each team meeting, Sarah found herself more engaged, her voice resonating louder and clearer. Word of her contributions began to circulate throughout the company, and she received congratulations from peers and supervisors alike. Recognition transformed from a distant dream to a tangible reality. She was establishing herself in her professional space. But more than that, she adapted the lessons from her work into her role as a mother. Each challenge Leo faced became lessons in resilience and advocacy, and she found a balance that allowed both responsibilities to coalesce beautifully. She learned that being vulnerable did not equate to weakness, it was the raw truth of human connection, whether in her work or her role at home. In a poignant moment, during a casual outing with Leo, she noticed a group of parents discussing medications like the ones Leo took. She felt the pull of her experiences and approached them to share her journey. As she exchanged insights, she saw understanding. In their eyes, she was contributing not just professionally but personally, bearing witness to the struggles of motherhood. In that moment, Sarah realized she had fully embraced her multifaceted identity, no longer denying any part of herself. Every challenge she faced opened doors to growth, revealing layers of capability she had never acknowledged. She had transformed from a woman balancing fear and pride into a leader forging new paths, an advocate for herself and her son. Her journey had come full circle, she was prepared for what lay ahead. She had not only achieved recognition in her career but also reached a level of profound fulfillment that altered the fabric of her life. Unpredictable challenges still awaited, but she stood fortified, ready to tackle them with renewed vigor. This was her moment of triumph. Sarah proved she could defy the narrative her insecurities had spun. She had earned every ounce of confidence through her dedicated efforts, reclaiming the life she desired for herself and Leo. It was indeed time for all to recognize the strength that could emerge from vulnerability. As Sarah reveled in this realization, she felt a surge of gratitude for every step she'd taken. She embraced the uncertainty of the future but understood now that it was hers to navigate with power and purpose, a story still unfolding brilliantly before her. And as she strolled down the vibrant city street with Leo by her side, it dawned on her, she was not merely a mother or a corporate player, she was a formidable force capable of achieving her dreams, fully embracing all the complexities that made her suitably unique. This is your moment to reshape your narrative just as Sarah did. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support powerful transformations like this one. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. we want to hear your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.